everyone. Welcome to the next session of the People Track. This is my name is Mitch Mark. I'm the APAC People Track leader, and you will be hearing the panel with Alex Kingsbury and SJ Jones. The title is "Don't Get Mad, Get a Bag: Navigating the Gender Pay Gap in the AM Industry." And from the number of attendees and growing that I can see, a lot of people are very interested in this conversation. So before we begin, as an Australian tradition, our meeting is being held on the lands of the Bunurong people, and I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. So I would like to introduce my two panelists. I think I'll do them justice, but I'm going to try. And Alex asked me to make some stuff up for her as well. So here you go. Sorry. SJ Jones. She has a master's in biomedical engineering and is also a mechanical engineer. SJ has extensive experience in R&D, CAD/CAM, and FEA, believes 3D printing is the way to decarbonize the world. She's one of the regulars in the Women in 3D Printing meetings and is a sucker for punishment. She chooses to join the very fun APAC meeting, which usually happens in the wee hours of Florida, and we love her for that. Alex Kingsbury needs no introduction in the additive manufacturing stratosphere. And if you're not familiar with her, where the bloody hell have you been? Alex is an additive manufacturing industry fellow at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology and is doing a PhD in design of aluminum alloys for wire arc additive manufacturing. I'm going to affectionately call her the Dr. WML once she graduates. So Alex
told you would do a better job than me.
Alex is the regional chair for Oceania for Women in 3D Printing and is a member of Standards Community as well. And she's such a nerd. Her theme for her birthday was metal, as in the material, not the music. I will hand it over to the two of them now.
All right. Are we ready to go, SJ?
Yeah, I guess the only person that we haven't introduced yet is the, motivator and my personal hero, Megan the Stallion, aka Tina Snow, aka Meg the Stallion, also known as the Hot Girl Coach and also known as Hot Girl Meg. She's an American rapper who came onto the rap scene in 2018, and since then she's been a 3-time Grammy winner and one of Time's 100 influential people. She's like one of my personal heroes, and one of her mottos is always "Don't get mad, get a bag," which is kind of like her version of, focus on the things that you can change, don't worry about the stuff that you can't. And that's what inspired this talk.
Exactly, yeah. Look, for all of you that don't know or aren't familiar with Megan, she's a legend. I will give a little forewarning. Don't go Googling her or her songs if you are faint of heart. That's probably enough warning from me. I think we should get into the slideshow, but suffice to say, Megan features heavily. That's also a bit of a warning. But we really hope, thank you all for being here, and I've thoroughly enjoyed everything we've typed so far, and we're really looking forward to giving you this talk. So okay. So just a bit of an overview for me. We wanted to talk about this because it's something that SJ and I talk about actually quite a lot as it relates to, the rest of the world, but also as it relates to us, to our friends in the industry, to other people that we've heard about. This is important. It's hard to talk about money. A lot of us are enculturated and conditioned to not want to talk about money. It's not seen as being proper. But it is actually really, really important. And the reason is that the decisions that you make now, or the way in which you allow the world to treat you, are going to impact you now and even bigger into the future. We want to talk about what the gender pay gap actually is, because that's pretty misunderstood, quite frankly. We also want to talk about how it relates to us in the AM industry. And yeah, we do have some anecdotal evidence so far, but we're not going to get mad about it, because if we can understand what's driving this gender pay gap, we can understand how to solve it. We can understand the strategies that we need to put in place to combat it. And we're also going to end with a bit of a call to action for industry. So data is a driver for this. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you more about the data. And take it away, SJ. What is the gender pay gap?
So the gender pay gap is basically the difference between men and women's pay expressed as a percentage. And we have to express it as a percentage because obviously it's not equal. Women are making a lot less than men, and that wage gap between like men and women is even bigger for women of color, anyone with disabilities, anyone who expresses their gender differently, or their sexual orientation even.
And what causes the gap? A number of different factors, which are, again, not particularly well understood, but we do know that there are many things that lead to this gender pay gap. It's really important to highlight that the gender pay gap happens according to full-time workers. So that's how the data is captured. So there's a common argument that goes around, which is, oh, well, a lot of women choose to work part-time, so that's why we have a gender pay gap. No, that's not the case. We're comparing apples for apples here, full-time workers for full-time workers. So that's really important. But it's caused by, number one, the biggest reason, discrimination in hiring and pay decisions. That is a huge driver for the pay gap. Number two, female-dominated industries attracting lower wages. That's obviously not so relevant to us in the AM industry, but it's definitely a really big driver of the gender pay gap globally, because women do work that, quite frankly, just is not valued very highly, which it should not be. Women also contribute more to unpaid and domestic work, both in the home, but also outside of the home in volunteer roles and so on. Women do spend time out of the workforce to have children, to care for elderly parents, basically take on societal burdens. And the reason that this is contributing to a gender pay gap is because they're opting out of the workforce, therefore not accumulating experience, expertise, and often hopping back into lower paid roles when they're ready to rejoin the workforce. And also might be pulling back on some of their responsibilities at work, so taking lower responsibility roles in order to be able to do this. There is a lack of flexibility to accommodate responsibilities such as caring for children, which definitely impacts women more so than men. And also we have this reduced hours and part-time work, which is a choice that many women and men choose to make through the course of their career. And like I mentioned, this isn't what directly contributes to the pay gap, but it is certainly a factor, because if you are, again, working part-time, there is a perception that you're not going to be as useful or productive as a worker, and so therefore you won't be earmarked for opportunities to progress your career. We are all facts, no printer here. SJ?
15 of the 20 highest paying jobs are dominated by men.
Women must work 59 additional days in a year to earn the same as a man.
Humans could be walking on Mars before men and women earn the same amount for the same work.
And the gap peaks at 20% for women aged between 44 and 55. This is found in Australia, but this is also seen across the developed world.
And the global pandemic has done nothing but exacerbate the gender pay gap.
So this data and this phenomenon is global. Here I have some of the OECD data. Only member countries of the OECD are required to report on their gender pay gap. I will say, though, that even the countries that are required to report are sketchy with some of their data. Some years they report and some years they don't. So again, I know I'm harping on data a lot, but it is problematic. You can't improve it if you can't measure it. If you can see across this map, the general range of pay gap across the developed world is about 15 to 20%. And that's pretty consistent across most of our major economies. What we find, for example, in the countries where we have a lot of AM activity, it's certainly around that 15 to 20%. So we know that this is relevant to us. There is some issues with the data collection, though. The data collection typically happens for companies who have 100 workers and above. This means that there is a whole lot of workers, female workers, that are not captured in this data collection. These are women who are working in, say, small to medium enterprise businesses, It doesn't capture any woman working in, say, the gig economy, freelancing, and so on. And we know that in these industries, this is where we have actually a higher gender pay gap because there's less transparency and less regulation. So while we have some data to baseline what we know our gender pay gap to be, we don't actually have really enough. And also it doesn't capture things like bonuses or other parts of someone's package as well. This is based on earnings only. One of the biggest issues with this data collection, because of that plus 100 employees factor, is that we're really capturing data from the corporate world only. And it means that there are we're capturing it from essentially the privileged class of people that do work in the corporate world. We know that this is anecdotally much worse outside of that privileged class.
So like Alex said, it's not just about gender, and it's also, not just about class. Intersectionality is where things like race, class, gender, where all those things overlap. Human beings are complex. We're not just one thing. So for me personally, I get asked on a regular basis what it's like working in a male-dominated industry when I'm not a man. And I'm kind of hurt by this question because no one bothers to ask me what it's like being Black in the industry. And so when they exclude that question and when they don't ask me about it, that part of my identity goes overlooked. It's kind of unseen, and I don't feel like I have the opportunity to be authentically myself in these conversations. So by not acknowledging the intersectionality in these discussions around the pay gap, we run the chance of discriminating against marginalized groups. And I'm going to kick it back to Alex to go more into intersectionality.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. The issue is that while we struggle to just capture wholesale the data, we really struggle to capture the intersectional data. And the thing is that those groups are experiencing things and other factors that we don't even understand because, like I said, we're not even looking at those groups as discrete groups as it relates to the gender pay gap. Some of the best intersectional data I've been able to find is from an American association, and that has been able to break it down. For every $1 a man earns in America, the average woman's earnings are 82 cents. For every $1 a man earns, an average Black woman's earnings are 62 cents. A Native American woman's earnings are 57 cents, and Hispanic woman's earnings are 54 cents. Can you see how inequitable this is when we start to overlay our intersectionalities? It's terrible. So my call out to you is, if you are a man who has tuned into our presentation, thank you. Thank you for being here. This is not an easy thing to listen to and to hear about. And quite frankly, a lot of men get very defensive when they hear these sorts of conversations. Having said that, we really need allies because these women can only advocate for themselves so much. For myself, we need to understand, and I'm going to point you to the little ladders over on the side of the slide deck there, which is, as a middle-class white woman, hello, the only thing I might experience as discrimination is sexism. But what happens to people of other intersectionalities? They are experiencing so much more through the course of their career. It is really incumbent upon me to be able to ally for those minority groups, to understand that while I might be experiencing my difficulties, there is a whole nother lot of group of people out there that are experiencing so many more challenges than me. We need to understand what is leading to those challenges, and we need to undo and unpick those challenges. So if I can say that as a middle-class white woman, if you want to say that as, say, a middle-class white man, that would be awesome. I'm going to advocate for those minority groups. Can you please advocate and ally for all of us?
Thank you for your honesty. So let's talk bank. Like, what does this mean in real numbers? So this graph is like vastly exaggerated, but I wanted to capture the lowest part of salary bands for these positions, as well as the highest part of salary bands for these positions. So as a Black woman coming into an entry-level engineering position, I expect to make somewhere around K. So if my male colleague makes 30% more than me, doing the math roughly, he's making 20 grand more than me per year. 20 grand is, you know, a down payment on a house in certain parts of the Americas. It's a down, you can buy a car with 20 grand. That's a student loan payment. And that's the money that you're leaving on the table when you don't negotiate for higher salaries and when we continue to perpetuate this gender pay gap. Are you mad yet?
Because you might be about to get madder.
Yeah, so let's talk girls in the additive.
So here are some quotes that have been shared with us anonymously, and we're really thankful to the people that have shared them with us, shared their stories with us. Take it away, SJ. No, I'm going to take this one away. My male colleague was paid 30K more than me, and he wasn't a qualified engineer. I have a master's degree in engineering.
My female colleague was offered 40K less than me, and we were doing the same role for the same organization. Ouch.
I found out I was getting paid 40K less than a man with less additive experience, less qualifications, and less overall workforce experience.
Burn. Okay, I was offered less than the advertised salary band, and my male counterpart of equivalent experience was offered 30K more inside the salary band.
So the point, big yikes, exactly, Ash. So the thing that we want to really convey here is we can talk about the gender pay gap globally, and people will just throw back at you, oh, that's because it's not, you know, it's driven by female dominated industries, it's driven by this, it doesn't apply to you. And again, you know, go back to the data collection, we don't collect the data in our industry, so we can't actually definitively say that there is a gender pay gap in our industry. But what we do know, and what we do have evidence of, anecdotal evidence, shared with us, might I say confidentially, and shared with us, might I say somewhat illegally, is that there is a gender pay gap. Gender pay gap is pervasive in the AM industry.
But, you know, don't get mad yet. Don't get mad yet.
We're not going to get mad.
Wait for this next part. Wait for this next part.
Because we're all about solutions. And while righteous anger is sometimes productive, it's only productive to an extent. So let's talk about where we're going to go from here. Career progression. This is a really, really important part of your trajectory and your earning potential and your overall wealth, okay? So it may be that you don't want to progress your career. You don't want to climb the ladder. You don't want to be the CEO. You don't want to be the vice president. And that's completely fine. And it might be that you don't want to be that if you're a man or a woman. Totally fine. No problems. The issue I see, though, is that women will often tell themselves they don't want it when they actually do. And also the issue is that women do want it and just get stuck somewhere in that career trajectory. And often children come into that equation, and often that is there's almost like a resignation that that's what has to happen. So don't opt out before you opt out. I've heard of stories of women who are choosing lower responsibility roles before they, like 5 years before they've had kids. That's just not necessary. And I can tell you from my own experience that the best role and the best opportunity I ever had in my career came when my twins were 8 months old. And another story, so that's a positive one. One that doesn't make me look very good at all is my boss once sat me down and said, what do you want to do in 5 years' time? And my first response was, to be honest, my husband and I are going to be adding more children to our family in the next 5 years. So I just don't really know what I want. Bad response, wrong response, Alex. Don't say stuff like that. Talk about it as if you're just going to go and pursue your career, what you want, not, oh, but children are a factor, or whatever else it is that's on your mind that you think might be a factor. Find a sponsor at your workplace. That's not a mentor. It's a sponsor. It's someone who is very senior and who will advocate for you at the highest levels. And the next one, be outspoken about your goals. Be outspoken about your goals, particularly to that sponsor. But be outspoken about your goals with your colleagues as well, with your boss. The more people know about what it is that you want to do, the more they're going to find those opportunities and open them up for you. Here's a tricky one. Track your achievements and their outcomes. It sounds really basic, but trust me, no one does this, including me. It's really hard at the end of the year to go and summarize all of your achievements throughout the whole year, to be able to put into that performance review. If you get a win and you can do the good thing like you should be, which is calculating the actual outcome for the organization that you work for, make sure you note it down in a journal or something, it doesn't matter, and make sure it goes in that performance review, because that is what will be one of the biggest indicators or biggest ways of getting ahead and getting the next opportunity. It'll go into your promotion paperwork, all of that. Working part-time doesn't mean you don't have to do meaningful work. Some of the best work I ever did was part-time. And in fact, part-time workers, in my experience, are some of the hardest workers. Often they're fitting 5 days into 3 days, which is not right, but it's true. So don't think that just because you're part-time that you should be overlooked for opportunities, or that you can't work on that big project, or whatever the case may be. And perhaps the next point, which is flexible work, should be for everyone. So, perhaps it's that there's a part-time role that can be flexible, and that actually works. And that means that you can be on that project, or you can be assigned to that client, or whatever it is that's important to you. Management versus technical streams. Eshay's going to actually talk about this in the next few slides, but this is an important consideration. Management tends to have a pretty steep trajectory in terms of earnings and promotion potential, but it does tend to sort of plateau around the middle level, and often that's when you tend to get quite burnt out. Versus the technical stream, which has that more sort of slow burn, it's very much an accumulation of experience. So consider where you're placed in the technical versus management, and what that means for you and your experience, and also for your qualifications. And yeah, put the support structures in place. It takes more than one person to have a successful career. You need to have a support team, and that support team exists in the workplace. It exists in your home. It is your mentor at work and home. It's your friends, it's your family, it's everyone.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so I really wanted to talk about playing the game, because if you don't know how the game is played, you can't win it. And this was really impactful for me in my career when I learned it, because I came from like a low socioeconomic background. No one in my family was an engineer. I didn't know what an engineer career was. When I signed up for this, I thought I would just have the title SJ, engineer for 35 years until I retired. I had no idea the nuances that really went into the engineering career. So I picked engineering because it's personal to me, but it may be different for marketing or for project management. I'm sorry, we haven't covered that, but you can get with me after this and we can go over it if you want to. All right, so to begin with, you're gonna start with like entry-level manufacturing engineer, then you're gonna move to then experienced, and then senior. And then you can move to the D-suite and the V-suite. That's typically how the career progression goes. And so the first 4 slots are the first 10 years of your career. So think about it. You're 24, 25, you just graduate from bachelor school. By the time you're 35, you will have finished the first 10 years of your career. And that's when you're going to need to start making the decision. Do I want to go director's chair? Do I want to go vice president? Do I want to be, Madam CEO? And then you need to start thinking about the skills you have to acquire along the way before you get there. And also, you want to push your salary band as high as possible. It doesn't hurt. So I've included some of that information here on this slide, as you can see. And so the main thing I really want to point out is the amount of experience that you need to move within like normal US-based organizations, as well as the education requirements. So for the entry-level manufacturing engineer and, for the next step up, you really just need your bachelor's degree. In the middle there, you start transitioning towards the requirement where they may want you to have a master's degree. You may want to start thinking about, do I need an MBA for my next role? Do I want to get an MBA? How is that going to help me? And then after that, you start seeing more jobs push towards the requirement for a PhD type of background in education. I personally think it's a little gatekeeping, but it's how the game is played. That's how I didn't write the rules. I'm just trying to help you learn them. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not attacking you, Alex. I know you're getting your PhD.
It's gatekeeping. It's gatekeeping.
Okay.
It's absolutely gatekeeping. I'm just playing the game.
Yes, exactly. You're just playing the game. And so this is the basics of how the game is played, but there's different levels to it. So as Alex alluded earlier, there's technical career paths and there's managerial career paths. And both of those can affect your earning potential and like timing for that earning potential. So if you like management and you like working with people and you think you want leading different teams and different projects, maybe the managerial route is for you. So you might want to start taking on skills and qualifications towards that avenue. But if you want to be more technical like me and you're a little bit more introverted and you like, doing things behind the scenes and focusing maybe on becoming really good at one niche thing, then maybe like a technical route is for you. But it's really important to think about it early on in your career and have those conversations as early as possible with your manager.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so securing the bag.
Securing the bag.
That's right. So men tend to negotiate harder for higher pay and benefits. This is a really well-known phenomenon. And what I would say about this is, first of all, a word of warning. And I say this with a sober heart. Unfortunately, women that come in hard on a negotiation are often seen as being a bit aggressive and get labeled a difficult woman. I don't want that to dishearten you from negotiating at all, but I think it's important to acknowledge that fact, okay? What I want you to think about is, if you are negotiating for yourself, imagine that you're actually negotiating for your best friend. So how hard would you fight for your best friend? I'm guessing you probably fight pretty hard, okay? The other thing is too, imagine if you're negotiating something at work, right? If you're negotiating for a better deal for your workplace, how would you go about that and how hard would you fight? I'm thinking you'd fight pretty hard. So, your negotiation skills are really going to come to the fore with your salary. It's important to be upfront, direct, but also relatively non-emotional. Be able to come with some very good reasons for why you think that you should get paid more. We could probably do a whole presentation on negotiation skills. I don't even consider myself an expert. But anyway, negotiate harder for a higher salary. Don't accept that first offer, okay? The first offer is not to be accepted. You will always negotiate for more. Please tell me that. All right, ask around, benchmark your salary, okay? This is going to be really important for your negotiation. And the way that you do this is through your trusted circle. So your trusted circle is, preferably within the industry, so that the people that you're talking to have a really good sense for the kinds of salaries that certain positions of certain levels of responsibility should be commanding. Your trusted circle can be, say, an ex-boss that you really like and get along with. Hopefully there's someone just slightly more senior than you, okay, or someone who has done hiring in this industry before. Recruitment agents are a wonderful resource. They are absolutely plugged in to this kind of information. Talk to a recruiter about the offer that you've been given, or even talk to a recruiter preferably before you've even started that process of job hunting, because then you should automatically know what sorts of jobs that you should be looking for. Beware of a stagnating salary. This can become a bit of an issue around your mid-career. If you are getting a stagnating salary, that generally means that you're probably not negotiating hard enough for yourself, or your career is stagnating. It's not always the case. And, there are opportunities sometimes that might pass your desk that aren't as well remunerated, but offer amazing opportunities for you to grow your career in a certain direction. And you can make that trade-off, but do it in an informed way. You need to advocate, or don't disclose your current salary in negotiations. In many parts of the world, it's illegal for an employer to ask for this information. So never disclose it if you've been asked, but never disclose it in general, okay? And also, don't use your current salary as a benchmark for where you should be going to next, or how much more you should be getting in your next role. Going for 10K more than your current role is not enough. It is not enough. There is every chance you are already underpaid currently. If you are benchmarking on your current role, you will continue to be underpaid. Advocate for yourself for raises and promotions. And this was a little bit what I was saying before, which is Be vocal about your goals with everyone in your organization. They should hopefully know what your aspirations are. Okay, the last one. This is tough, but move. Okay, a new job is your easiest route to a higher salary. I don't say this lightly. I feel like I think that every job move should be considered very, very carefully. I certainly wouldn't advocate job hopping because I think that's kind of generally accepted as quite poor form. And what I mean by that is, kind of hopping every 12 months or less. But if you have been in a position and you've made some good achievements that you can whack on that CV, and it's not working out for you in that place, and you have tried to make it work in earnest, then maybe it's time to start looking. The additive industry job market is hot right now. It's absolutely hot. So it's your market to go and negotiate, and it's your market to go and make the most of. So yeah, know your worth.
Yeah, speaking of know your worth, I looked up some quick salaries for random different positions of people who are going to be attending our career fair on Thursday. Check it out below. I use LinkedIn Salary Insights, but it does have like a pay barrier. So Alex, if you slide to the next slide. You can also use sites like Glassdoor to get salary insights. They also offer company insights. They're very insightful for specific sites, and like maybe the person who had the role before you has actually posted and reviewed it. So it's a great place to go and check things out and do your own research before you go into that first interview or that second interview. So you have a better idea of what to expect. Know your worth.
Absolutely. Okay. We're going to talk about family now. I just want to say, a lot of this conversation is very heteronormative dominated. Okay, so that's a bit of a disclaimer up front, because there are some generalizations that do apply to most of us here. But in general terms, your partner and you might be considering having or starting a family. And this is really the biggest point in time at which a woman's earnings and career potential starts to drop off, is when children arrive. Your partner is going to have some expectations around childcare, domestic work, mental load. These are all things that, when it was just you two and you were having great time, when children come on the scene, things change dramatically, and there will be expectations that perhaps you have not talked through with your partner already. And it's important to do that, and preferably like before you get married or like settle down or decide to have children with them. You have to ask, will your partner take parental leave? It's generally accepted that men don't take the parental leave, or they wouldn't take that extended period of parental leave like women do generally. And that might be an expectation that they have that's just assumed. And it's important to have that conversation well before you've even started trying for a baby. Okay. The primary breadwinner tends to be the one that returns to work after children. So often there's a calculation that is done between couples. And again, very heteronormative, but I'm just going to say it like this. Man earns quite a bit. Woman earns 75% more. Woman has a baby. They start a family. Woman takes a bit of time off, obviously, to bond with baby, establish breastfeeding, recover from childbirth, and that's very normal. What happens is that the couple then decide, how are we going to cope financially going into the future, and what should we do around the childcare of this new child? That's a really personal decision, and there is no one right answer for any one couple. Everyone has their own unique way of managing that, but you will be having that conversation, and often the conversation looks like this. Man says, well, I earn more than you, so I think I should continue working full time. Woman says, well, that logically makes sense because more money is good and that helps support us. So I will go part-time. And again, going back to the gender pay gap, what that means is that that woman then, again, these are societal expectations that are overlaid. But she goes back to work part-time. Part-time roles are seen as being less important, less productive, less useful to the organization. She then misses out on a whole lot of opportunities while she is doing that part-time work. And then she's not earmarked for, career progression within the organization. She's not put into the leadership courses. She's not given those wonderful career opportunities. So what happens then is that meanwhile, the man in his full-time role, who's barely taken a blip of parental leave, continues on in his career, continues climbing up in his career. And in fact, what the data shows is that men's wages increase after they have children. And in fact, men, do you want to get mad? Because men without children are shown to earn less on average than men with children. So that's what happens at that crucial time in life, around your 30s, happens to intersect with your mid-career, a really important time. And this is really a big contributor towards that gender pay gap because of the lack of career progression that you get. There is this thing called the motherhood penalty, which is that when you return to work, everyone knows you as the mum and thinks you have responsibilities elsewhere. We won't impinge upon your time too much. You wouldn't want to have to travel because you've got children now. And that is just assumed for you. So be aware of the fact that that exists. I also want to put a big disclaimer out here that, the taking time out of the workforce to care for your children is a really legitimate and very valuable thing to do. I don't want to discredit that at all. And like I said, everyone's choices are different, and it's a little bit like maybe you don't want to have the big career, and that's completely fine. No judgment. But the thing is that most women are making these choices or having these choices made for them because of general societal expectations that have already been set. And we need to be aware of those, and we need to make sure we are working against them.
I have to say something, just,
But there's good news.
Yes. So the good news is this isn't all your responsibility.
Exactly. Workplaces need to take more action. So I know that a lot of you have tuned in because you're interested in this from your personal point of view. But if you have tuned into this and you are a boss or you are someone of some level of responsibility within an organization, this next slide is for you.
So
because workplaces have a very important role to play.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. So in our workplaces, we can start, I'm just saying, if we can do in-process monitoring, we can conduct a gender pay gap audit. We can report our data. We can have salary bands. We don't need pay secrecy clauses.
Exactly.
And we can remove the potential for discrimination in hiring practices.
That's right. And Women in 3D Printing release a diversity for additive manufacturing report every year.
Yes.
I have to say I was really discouraged to read that because of the companies that were surveyed, the vast majority of them did not have any practices in place to remove the potential for discrimination in hiring practices. I appreciate the fact that they're being honest, but that's terrible and that needs to change. Workplaces also need to offer and encourage the uptake of shared parental leave. Okay, so this is about encouraging men to take parental leave as much as women do. And, this is something that happens in those wonderful enlightened Nordic countries, and doesn't kind of happen quite as much here. I know that in Australia, we actually have a little bit more of an equitable program where you can choose which parent takes that parental leave. I know in the States, it's terrible. But even in Australia, when you can choose which parent takes the parental leave, the vast majority of women will be taking that leave and not men. And the way that you can offer and encourage the uptake of shared parental leave is actually by leading from the top. So I've heard of stories of, say, the CEO who will take parental leave when a newborn baby arrives in their family, or will take parental leave when their wife goes back to work and they want to be able to transition into, a new situation for their family a little bit more smoothly and easily. Flexible work should be for all employees. And I think we've learned this through the global pandemic, where work has had to be very flexible. That's suited our employers. But flexible work should be for everyone. And it's not just about children. It's also about other caring responsibilities. And it's also about other responsibilities in general that we have in our life outside of work. Flexible work means that we can do the work that we need to do, but do it in a way that doesn't leave us completely strung out and reconsidering our career choices and our options. And we also need to establish policies that are gender neutral and family friendly. The best thing about feminism, I think, is that when we push for change, it will help women in general. That's the idea. We're pushing for change to enhance or make more equitable the status of women. The best thing about it, though, is that when we do that, we make life more equitable for everyone, right? Men deserve to have gender neutral, well, family friendly policies in their workplace as well. They should be allowed and enabled and feel okay about spending time with their family. So let's go get that bag, SJ.
Okay, hotties, let's go get the bag. Yes. So yeah, thank you all for coming out and spending time with us. If you want any links to the data, Alex is an academic, so she saved all of the resources down below.
I did.
Sorry, Alex. I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so as SJ said, you know, we as an additive industry, we spend a lot of time qualifying our parts. How about we start qualifying equal pay or, you know, the gender pay gap within our industry? We don't collect any of this data. It is all sitting there within companies. Nothing is collected, nothing is reported upon. If you don't measure it, you can't improve it. So thank you.
Thank you, SJ and Alex, for that very insightful presentation. The Q&A session is going off the roof. Before I get to ask some questions, I just wanted to point out for Australian companies, actually a lot of people don't know this, the Australian government have this website called the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. And the interesting, I came about this website because I was applying for a company grant, and apparently if your company is listed on the Workplace Gender Equality Agency site, the company is not allowed to apply for government grants. So this means that Australian companies need to do a little bit better to actually improve on workplace gender equality and not get onto a website. Yeah, that's number 4. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mitch. There's some really good resources out there, and really all of the data that we've collected comes from any one of these websites. Happy to point you to specific facts, but if you want to go to any of these websites, you can also find them all yourself.
Yeah. So yeah, a few McDonald's and Laurent Bakery is actually on the list, which is not very good. Q&As. Okay, so there's a few questions asked. I think Christina has asked about, can you explain more about finding a sponsor in your workplace?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, the sponsor should be you know, quite a lot senior to you. And often companies will give you the opportunity to have like a sort of a, you know, say cross-department mingling session or networking or whatever. Just really try and make use of those. It is a little odd to just be like, walk up to the director's office like, hello, will you be my sponsor? That's kind of not the way it works. And this is the power of networking, quite frankly. Ideally, your sponsor chooses you, right? They have to really want to believe in you and advocate for you. But the way I suppose you can try and make that happen is just by making yourself seen. You know, and I'm a big believer in like, just get to know the person before you start talking about yourself. You know, just ask a couple of questions about their career, and they'll start to just tune into the fact that you're obviously engaged and interested, and, you know, and wanting to contribute meaningfully. SJ, did you, have something?
So for me, when I started to find sponsors at work, a lot of it was due to like me asking right questions, like at the right time. It's like if we're like in a group meeting and there's leadership there, asking insightful questions or questions that help lead to a solution help to make me stand out. Definitely painted me as like someone that they wanted to get to know and like keep a tab on in their eyes. So that pushed me more towards like them being more willing to have sidebars with me, like, hey, have you thought about your future here? And I'm kind of just like, are you offering to sponsor me? Type of like conversations. So yeah, it does happen organically like that, at least for me.
Okay. All right. Another question we have is, any thoughts on or research on how compensation in forms of equity in a startup plays into salary? For example, you get a promotion and a small pay raise, but lots of fake stock that may become real stock someday.
Sorry.
It's anonymous, so.
That's a really good question. And I've had on a number of occasions that conversation. And stock's nice. If you're working for a startup, it's kind of expected, especially when you're getting in at the early stages. But it at the end of the day, you got to pay the bills. Okay, so don't take too much of a hit on your salary just because they're offering you these stock options or shares in the company or whatever. It's not that valuable to you. Actually, it might be, but quite frankly, that's your payoff for working the hard yards that you did in a startup, is my opinion. At the end of the day, your salary has got to be competitive with the market. I think there's a general expectation that, if you work for a startup, you don't get as well paid. And, there is maybe a little bit of, credibility to that idea. But I don't have a lot of time or patience for it, actually, when it comes to just really undercutting people and taking advantage of them. So, what I would say is, if you know you're accepting a lower salary because it's a startup, you make sure that startup is going to give you some amazing experience, right? And you're going to get to work with some awesome, awesome people. That's why you would go down that route. And stock options, always make sure you do that, but make sure you can pay your bills first.
Good advice. April Stearns is the Melbourne ambassador for women in 3D printing. Her question is, do you feel that tech women are often pushed towards management rather than hands-on tech as a career path in the workplace?
Take it, SJ.
I feel very personal about this, as it's currently one of the struggles that I'm facing. So yes, I definitely do feel that I see a lot of my female colleagues being pushed towards management roles. Women tend to be the one that we focus more on getting things done and we don't let things slip through the cracks as compared to like our male colleagues. Like we are the ones that go that extra mile, at least what I've seen. So they tend to want to put us in those management roles, and it's a lot harder to get into the technical roles and stay in the technical roles. And like I mentioned gatekeeping earlier, that whole PhD thing, I found out recently that for me to reach like subject matter expert along the career path that I'm trying to travel along, I'm gonna have to go get my PhD. And I'm kind of bummed because I was like, man, I already got my master's. Now I've really got to go back and like get this PhD if I want to keep going along this technical route. It may be easier for me just to go the managerial route, but don't opt out before you opt out. So I'm trying to keep as many options open. So my advice to people who are getting like herded into these management roles is to don't block your blessings, don't block the opportunity. Just make sure you have a conversation with your leadership or with your manager and say, hey, like I'm willing to accept this management role for a period of like 2 to 3 years, but then after that, I really want to pivot back more towards a more technical thing. So yeah, that's what I found has worked, and it's just don't block your blessings.
Okay. All right. Kat, the lead technician at Peloton, has asked, if I don't have someone to compare my salary to, how can I tell if I'm being paid equitably?
Want me to take this one, or do you want to take this one?
You can take it.
I have had this issue in the past before because you can't find my job title on LinkedIn. Like I couldn't find it anywhere. So then I would just find things that were adjacent. So like what you can do is in the LinkedIn search bar, you can literally put in quotes like your educational experience or any of your background experience. And then you can see roles comparable to your education and background experience to get a gauge of what people with your degree and your levels of experience are being paid. And then you can also search by city or by country to see like what that's worth. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. Faith is one of the volunteers who has kept us honest throughout. Her question is, knowing your worth is the toughest thing. Any advice for imposter syndrome?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. Yeah, so imposter syndrome is a thing, and it's definitely a thing that women experience more so than men, and you know, there's a really common thing of like the guy will apply for a job if he meets like 3 of the 9 criteria or whatever it is, and the woman will only apply for the job if she meets all of the criteria and then maybe a little bit extra as well, and that's you know, imposter syndrome underpins that phenomenon. So it does mean that you're just putting yourself forward less for opportunities when you could be putting yourself forward more. How to get over imposter syndrome? Honestly, Google it. There's actually lots of resources out there for imposter syndrome. I did hear one really good tip, which is if you're feeling a little bit down on some of your experience or your knowledge or whatever it is, and you're needing a bit of a confidence boost, you write down whatever it is that you're struggling with, and then sort of turn it into a positive. So, you know, for example, I'm not good at CAD modeling. I don't know. And then you say like, I'm not, it's definitely not SJ. I'm not good at, and then write, I'm not, say I am good at CAD modeling when, and then you write what it is that helped you with your CAD modeling. That's a really basic tip. Honestly, I really don't consider myself the font of all knowledge. I've actually found that other people believing in me has helped me inordinately, right? So it's other people vouching for me and validating, you know, the skills and the experience that I bring to the table. You know, I think that's a treacherous path to take though, because you shouldn't be relying on other people for your own validation.
Yeah. From my perspective, it sounds a little crazy. I have massive imposter syndrome, and so like I have this like internal struggle where I don't believe that SJ deserves more, or I don't believe that SJ is as good as SJ is. So what I do is I take my resume and delete my picture off of it, and I delete my title, and I put some random name like Kevin or something at the top, and then I read Kevin's resume, and I'm like, would Kevin accept this number? If I was a white male with this resume, would I accept this number? Would I accept this offer? And I think about like my colleagues that I've discussed like their pay with, who have been comfortable with me, and I'm like, would they accept this offer? So I just, yeah, that's my way of doing it, is I just have my resume and I delete my name at the top and like trick myself into thinking it's someone else's when I like do these kinds of assessments.
It's always Kevin. It's Kevin that doesn't pick up the cups after the meeting and put them in the kitchen. You know, it's Kevin that asks someone else to take notes. Anyway, sorry to all the Kevins in the audience.
I'm busy checking to see whether there's any Kevins in our participants. I'm sorry, Kevin.
And you know, take a leaf out of Megan Thee Stallion's book, quite frankly. Just if you can stomach it, listen to the songs for a bit. You know, she's an inspiration, and there's loads of inspirational women out there that you can just be in the presence of, and you will gain that confidence for yourself. And I noticed in the comments, you know, have a hype woman, you know, just your hype people. You need those people around you, definitely. So when you find them, don't let them go.
Okay. All right. Salary slides, are those in US? I'm assuming the slides that were presented were in US dollars. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Next question. How do you master the bravery to be completely kind to yourself and decide to demand more? Lisa from Global Sales and Marketing.
Now, Lisa with the tough questions. I want Lisa to come on and answer that question. I think, okay, so going back to what I was saying before, which was around like, how would you negotiate if it was your best friend, you know? Think about someone that you really love and cherish and you want to see the best for, and you know that they deserve more. Try not to think about it as yourself necessarily. I sometimes find that that's a really good exercise to go through. Not so much, I guess, in more recent times, actually, if I'm just feeling very run down, and I just keep pushing myself, and sometimes I have been able to catch myself and go like, hey, you know, if you saw your best friend in this state, what would you be telling them? So, you know, I think that's just going into that, like being kind to yourself. We are our harshest critics, and we are so tough.
Okay. I've been asked to start wrapping up. There's actually a few more questions that I think it's pretty good. So Josh, I think he's probably one of the rare few guys that's online today. And his question is, what are your thoughts reshaping the roles men traditionally play outside of work, childcare, parental leave as an additional method for rebalancing the scales professionally?
Thank you, Josh. Hello, Josh. What was the question again? Sorry.
What are your thoughts reshaping the roles men traditionally play outside of work, childcare, parental leave as an additional method for rebalancing the scales professionally?
Yeah. So I mentioned that, sorry, I'll just quickly jump in and then SJ, you go for it. I mentioned that I got a really great opportunity when my twins were about 8 months old, which, like I said, it was very much career defining. It was group leader of additive manufacturing, and here I am today. So, and I didn't deliberate over taking the role because I knew I wanted it. But my husband and I had a bit of a sort of an understanding that our kids wouldn't be in childcare any more than 3 days a week. And that was, like I said, these decisions are very personal. But, you know, that's what we had agreed. I was part-time 3 days a week. I was offered the role and I was told, this is a really big role, which it was, and we don't think you can do it 3 days a week. So would you be amenable to going 4 days a week? And I then took that back to my husband and we talked about it, and he said, no problems, I'll go 4 days a week as well. And that way we can balance it so we've each got a day off a week and our kids are still in childcare only 3 days a week. That's just a little example of how we can make those things work. And I think that if we want to overhaul society, that's a much bigger problem to solve in this presentation. But there are things that you can do at the micro level that rebalance. And I think it's really important to have those conversations, like I said, preferably like before you get married, before you decide to settle down together, before you even have that children conversation, or around the time you have that children conversation. Go for it, SJ.
Yeah, so real quick, my advice to you is personally, like, we sit down once a month and we say, like, to each other, like, how can I best support you this month? To the table, like, hey, I have a huge conference call that's happening on the 25th. So the week of the 25th, I really need you to, like, help with the meals. I need you to, like, make sure that the boy is taken to and from daycare, and, you know, that everything is squared away that week, because I really have to focus in on that. My partner is currently getting a PhD, so every time there's a qualifier, I have the dates marked in my calendar, so I know that, like, the weeks of qualifiers, my partner needs me to pick up the extra slack around the house, whether it's extra cleaning, extra laundry, having the meals prepped, everything fresh and ready. So that's just, like, one of the easy ways that you can really show support to your partner to help balance the scales at home. Yeah.
And I got to say, like, shared calendars is just like a godsend. I mean, that's just, you can allocate each other tasks, like you can organize your whole life and then you're all on the same page, and there's no like, well, I'm out of town that week. Oh, I'm out of town that week too. Well, who's going to look after the kids? Like, yeah, just, you can be organized and make it work. You got to have the right mentality and the right attitude though. Like if you're with someone who just thinks it's your job to look after the kids and it's your responsibility, that's not going to work. Like you need to go and renegotiate that situation.
Go and renegotiate.
And don't accept the first number you said. Yeah, got that.
Exactly. 4 days, not 3.
All right, I think that's about all we have time for. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, SJ, for such a invigorating chat. This is probably the longest conference we've had. We were supposed to do it for half an hour. This is more than an hour. So I hope everyone's got a little bit of insight to take away with them. And if you have any other questions, Alex and SJ can be found on LinkedIn, Twitter, and all the other social media handles that they've put out there.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, SJ. It's been a pleasure and a delight. And thank you, Mitch, for keeping us on track.
Thank you.
See you later, everyone. Come join us in the main stage for a bit of networking if you've got more questions.
Okay. All right.